The old wooden fence looked like it had survived one storm too many, leaning dangerously toward the empty road as cold autumn wind pushed against its broken boards. An elderly man stood alone beside it with trembling hands, trying to lift a heavy post that no one his age should have been struggling with. Cars drove past without slowing down. People glanced at him, then looked away. I almost did the same. I was already late for work, my own life was falling apart, and helping someone else felt impossible. But something deep inside me refused to let me keep walking. I had no idea that stopping for a few minutes would change not only his life, but mine forever, leading me to a promise, a friendship, and a meeting that would heal wounds I never knew I carried. Before we continue, if you believe that kindness, compassion, and second chances can truly change lives, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone you care about, and subscribe to Kindness Corner. Every act of support helps us bring more inspiring stories to people around the world. Life had been painfully ordinary for me, but not in a peaceful way. Every morning felt like a race against bills, responsibilities, and disappointment. I worked long hours at a hardware store that barely paid enough to cover rent, groceries, and the old pickup truck that seemed to break down every other month. My dreams of becoming an architect had slowly disappeared beneath unpaid debts and endless overtime shifts. Most evenings I returned home too exhausted to cook a proper meal, often settling for instant noodles while wondering if life would ever become more than surviving one week after another. The neighborhood where I lived reflected that same feeling of quiet struggle. The houses were old, their paint faded by decades of sun and rain. Children rarely played outside anymore, and neighbors seldom spoke beyond a quick wave. Everyone seemed trapped inside their own worries. It wasn't an unfriendly place. It was simply a place where people had forgotten how much they needed one another. At the very end of my street stood a small white house surrounded by tall maple trees. Its owner was a quiet, elderly man named Walter. I knew almost nothing about him except that he had served in the military many years ago. An American flag hung neatly from his porch every single day, never faded, never torn, always carefully folded whenever storms threatened. He lived alone and rarely left home except for short walks to collect his mail or buy groceries. Some neighbors described him as distant, others called him stubborn, but no one ever said he was unkind. That chilly Saturday morning, the sound of hammering echoed through the neighborhood as I stepped outside to take out my trash. Looking toward Walter's property, I noticed several fence posts lying on the ground after strong winds had swept through during the night. Walter was trying to repair everything by himself. Every movement looked slow and painful. He paused often to catch his breath before attempting another lift. Even from across the street, I could see the strain on his tired face. For several long seconds I watched without moving. My mind reminded me of everything waiting for me that day. Laundry, grocery shopping, extra hours at work, my own leaking kitchen sink. I convinced myself that someone younger from his family would surely arrive to help him. But no one came. Minutes passed, and Walter remained alone, wrestling with pieces of heavy timber far beyond what his aging body should have been carrying. Something inside me refused to ignore him any longer. I crossed the street and simply asked if he could use another pair of hands. Walter looked surprised, almost as if he wasn't used to hearing those words anymore. His eyes studied me carefully before he quietly nodded. There was no dramatic introduction, no emotional speech, only silent gratitude hidden beneath years of discipline and pride. The work turned out to be far more difficult than I expected. Several fence posts had snapped completely, while others needed to be dug out and replaced. We measured boards, mixed concrete, hammered nails, and struggled to keep everything perfectly straight. Walter moved slowly, but every instruction he gave reflected years of experience. He believed that if something was worth repairing, it deserved to be repaired properly. Hours passed beneath gray autumn skies. Sweat covered my clothes despite the cool weather. My hands became sore, and my back ached from lifting heavy lumber. Yet strangely, I didn't regret staying. There was something peaceful about working beside someone who valued effort more than words. As the afternoon sun began to break through the clouds, Walter disappeared into his house and returned carrying 2 glasses of homemade lemonade. We sat quietly on overturned buckets near the newly repaired fence. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. It felt earned. Looking around his yard, I noticed small details I hadn't seen before. Carefully trimmed flower beds surrounded the porch. Wind chimes hung beneath the roof, gently singing with every breeze. A weathered wooden bench faced the sunset, and beside it rested an old military helmet filled with blooming red flowers. Every corner of the property seemed to hold a memory that had been preserved with quiet respect. For the first time, Walter spoke about something other than the fence. He mentioned serving overseas decades earlier, though he offered few details. He explained that many memories stayed locked away because some stories were too heavy to tell. His voice carried neither pride nor regret, only the calm acceptance of someone who had lived through more than words could explain. Listening to him made my own problems feel strangely smaller. I had been consumed by overdue bills and career disappointments. Yet here sat a man who had witnessed hardship beyond anything I could imagine and still found beauty in tending flowers and repairing broken fences. As evening approached, we placed the final board into position. The fence stood stronger than before, stretching proudly along the edge of his property. Walter stepped back, resting both hands on the top rail, as if admiring far more than wood and nails. His tired face slowly softened into a genuine smile. That simple smile carried more gratitude than any paycheck I had received in years. Before I left, Walter thanked me quietly. Then he paused for several thoughtful seconds while staring toward the distant horizon. His expression became unexpectedly emotional, almost as though he had reached an important decision that had taken years to make. Finally, he looked directly into my eyes and spoke words that would remain with me forever. He said there was someone he wanted me to meet. At first, I assumed he meant a family member or perhaps an old friend visiting town. But something about the way he said it felt different. His voice carried hope, sadness, and anticipation all at once, leaving me with more questions than answers. I agreed to return the following afternoon, completely unaware that the meeting waiting for me would uncover a remarkable story of sacrifice, forgiveness, and a bond that had quietly survived across decades. The repaired fence behind us stood as proof that sometimes the smallest act of kindness becomes the first step toward healing something far greater than broken wood. If this story has already touched your heart, let us know where you're watching from in the comments. We'd love to hear from you.